It's a story with twists and turns that many thought was over.
The person I am wouldn't hurt anybody.
The body of 60-year-old Dalton Gilmer was found in Washington County, Virginia.
Just 1 second.
I think we had a doctor visit.
Really didn't know any details besides that Vince Gilmer was the previous doctor.
He tells the judge his brain's not working right.
It gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
We begin back in Fletcher, at the family practice of Dr. Benjamin Gilmer.
It all got started right here in this building. I can't believe 10 years has gone by already. So this is the space where I started my career as a doctor after I graduated from AHEC. This was my first job, and unbeknownst to me, there was another Dr. Gilmer who was here before. And so when I arrived here in this room, I started hearing stories about the other Dr. Gilmer. There were stories about him going to his patients' t-ball games and taking, vegetables for payment.
In June 2004, Dr. Vince Gilmer, no relation to Dr. Benjamin Gilmer, checked his father out of Broughton Psychiatric Hospital in Morganton to transfer him for private care. But instead, he strangled 60-year-old Dalton Gilmer, the man he said sexually abused him as a child, cut off his fingers, and dumped his body in Southwest Virginia near the North Carolina border. 2 days later, Vince reported his father missing. The body of 60-year-old Dalton Gilmer was found in Washington County, Virginia a week ago today. He was arrested. Gilmer's capture came shortly after midnight. Someone called police after spotting him near South Tunnel Road. On a recheck of the area, officers saw him in the parking lot of the Best Buy. One yelled for Gilmer to stop, but say the suspect took off behind the Lowe's store, running into a thicket of woods. Officers surrounded the area and called in a police dog. And admitted killing his dad. Another strange turn in an already bizarre case. As Dr. Vince Gilmer makes his first court appearance in Buncombe County, he tells the judge his brain's not working right. Gilmer's attorney says he's had little time to see his client since his arrest early this morning, and the case is moved till later. His attorney also says Gilmer needs medical attention. In 2005, Vince represented himself at trial, saying something wasn't right in his head.
The person I am wouldn't hurt anybody. The person that did that was because of the withdrawals from the Lexapro.
But jurors rejected his insanity defense.
The court described him as a cold-blooded murderer.
Vince received a life sentence. A man beloved in his Buncombe County community and seen as kind by many.
In a strange way, I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be that rural doctor. But it was a weird way to start a career, kind of walking the footsteps of someone who was a presumed murderer. Then I became very curious.
After years of curiosity, he sent a letter to Vince Gilmer in his Virginia prison in 2012 and ultimately decided to go meet him in person.
When you first saw him, what were your initial thoughts?
When I first saw him, I couldn't believe it because he didn't match. He's only 8 years older than me, and he looked like he was 70 years old at the time. He was emaciated. He walked very slowly. He had sort of a stooped anterior posture. He had these grimaces, this dyskinesias, the kind of tremors in his hands.
It became clear something was very wrong.
He looked like someone straight from a movie, straight from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or something.
He tried to pull my head down into his lap, and that was when the voices, the thoughts, it's not voices, it's thoughts. His thoughts took over. Thoughts. I wasn't in control.
So it was clear to me that he was not right, that he had an illness, that he had either a psychiatric or neurologic illness that caused those symptoms.
He took local psychiatrist Steve Bowie to help get a diagnosis.
He was bent over, his arms were moving in a strange way, his face had grimacing, and he was shuffling.
This was the second visit after seeing him, and we were both convinced afterwards that he was not faking symptoms. It was believed during his trial that he was malingering, that he was actually faking the same symptoms that I was observing.
It's because my brain's, it doesn't have the right chemicals to work right.
And that he'd been doing that for over 12 years. And so we both knew that that was not possible.
Then, the huge revelation.
By the time we made it to the car, we were convinced that he had a rare neurologic illness called Huntington's disease.
He's not working right. It really needs to be working right.
Huntington's is an inherited condition that leads to brain damage, starting usually in the early 40s.
Unfortunately, there's no treatment for it. And his symptoms started when most people with Huntington's blossoms, which is around 40. And that was the same time that he killed his father.
Genetic tests later confirmed it.
And so at that point, I had to decide, well, what is my role as a doctor in this community, as an advocate, basically. And it was clear that we had to fight for him.
Getting together a legal team and learning the process.
And so we decided that we were going to pursue clemency. And so that was our Hail Mary.
Reaching out to Virginia's governor to get Vince moved to a hospital.
We made a petition that was a 100-page document and included some of the leading voices in Huntington's throughout the whole country.
After 6 years of work, Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe denied the clemency petition in 2018.
So during this time, I was really getting to know Vince as a person and visiting my whole family, visiting him frequently, and he was had become sort of a brother by this time. Like I was learning about his experience in prison, and my kids who were 4 and 6 were learning about his experience in prison.
So there was no giving up.
And so we became more emboldened to try to get him out because his symptoms were declining rapidly.
In 2018, Governor Ralph Northam was elected.
Finally, we get a neurologist who was elected governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Like, what are the chances of that? Like, we thought it was a miracle, actually, that a neurologist would have become governor of Virginia. And so there's a waiting period after you fail clemency. You have to wait 2 years.
The legal team applied again and waited another year and a half. In June 2019, Governor Northam denied it.
And at that point, it was such a shock because we all believed that he was going to do it. And again, the simple ask was just to get him to a hospital, a locked hospital, a place where he would spend the rest of his life. And so we felt like a failure. Vince felt hopeless and was continuing to feel increasingly hopeless.
Benjamin began writing an advocacy piece, a book titled The Other Dr. Gilmer.
I wrote this book and I gave it to the governor. Before it was published, I gave it a box of books to the governor's office at Christmas time, just weeks before his last days in office.
At 10 p.m. on Governor Northam's last day in office in January 2022.
We got a call from the Secretary of the Commonwealth that he had granted clemency. And so we were all so excited. Like again, this was like 18 years that Vince had been in prison at this time. And we thought we had won. Like we thought the battle was over and that we would finally get him out so he could start getting the care he needed.
But that wasn't the case. Vince would spend 2.5 more years in prison as a free man.
I mean, his disease was really accelerating at this point. Like he was unable to walk on his own. He was in a wheelchair at all times. He could no longer feed himself. His depression was worsening. His anxiety was worsening. He was really spinning out of control.
Years of help had come from far and wide.
Josh Stein has been very supportive. I've interacted, I've spoken to Governor Cooper about this. So there's been a lot of state support for Vince, but out of everyone, like Julie Mayfield has been our biggest support.
Good morning, everyone.
The North Carolina state senator and attorney who worked for Amnesty International.
I have no patience when the government affirmatively sets aside or refuses to look at information that could change the course or outcome of a trial.
Now, emotionally connected to the case, just like Benjamin.
We realized that in order to get him out, I needed to be his guardian. That his mother is in her 80s, and so we wanted to do everything we could to make the argument to Virginia that we had this plan to get him out, that we had a hospital that would take him, that I would be responsible for him.
But finding a hospital to take him was another issue.
But it turns out that if you have a mental illness, if you have Huntington's disease, if you have felony, if you have committed murder, no one wants to take you.
A GoFundMe was started for Vince's transport and care, with a goal of $100,000, which was met. Finally, a hospital accepted him, but later backed out.
That's how I got involved, really, because if he wasn't going to go to Mission, he still needed to go somewhere because he needed to get out of jail. So I started looking at other hospitals in the region and making phone calls to people that I knew at those hospitals, and we found him a spot.
Right here in Western North Carolina, and a regional hospital that prefers to remain anonymous at this time to protect Vince's, to protect his care.
Vince had a place to go and could leave prison.
I want to know the emotion driving to Virginia to pick him up. What is going through your mind when you are literally going to get him?
So that day he arrived, the van went to pick him up, and my family was there. My daughter and son and my wife were there, and there's a line of correctional officers lined up in front of the prison that day, like a tour de force, kind of reminding us of the barriers between us and them.
But Vince appeared.
And then we got him. Then we got him out, and the first thing he wanted was a hug, because that was one of his hallmarks as a physician. He would hug his patients, and because of that, they called him the Bear. It was so symbolic, to see what he had been missing all these days, because people who are incarcerated, they're stripped of their physical contact, they're stripped of their dignity. So the hug was very emblematic of that. So he was free, and we put him in a van, and we drove him back to North Carolina, which was amazing.
Giving him a few of his favorite things along the way.
He wanted Twinkies, and mellow mushroom pizza. Yeah, those were his two big wishes. And so we were en route to the hospital. The trajectory to the hospital is the clinic here, and so we made a very brief stop here so he could see this place, so he could see where the place he built.
Vince finally made it home to Western North Carolina. Senator Mayfield met him for the first time 3 weeks later.
And I'm probably gonna cry. It was very powerful, I think, for both of us. He knows who I am. He knows the role that I played in getting him home. And so I walk in the room, and Benjamin's there, and he introduces us. And Vince immediately tries to get up out of the bed. And so he sat up, and he turned, and he was trying to stand up. And he kept sort of reaching his arms out this way toward me. And I finally just said, "Do you want a hug?" And he said, "Yes." And so we hugged. And yeah, it was very powerful.
A journey for Vince and many advocates along the way.
I mean, it's been the legal journey, it's been the advocacy journey, it's been fighting 3 governors journey, it's been keeping my family together journey, learning how to maintain a practice journey, learning how to be a physician journey.
Now, another journey begins as Vince struggles to survive, moving him to a specialty hospital for Huntington's patients.
That's hard because he wants to be here. He wants to be here where his friends are, where I am. But instead, he's gonna be alone in a hospital outside of our state because we don't have the resources yet to take care of him. That's super hard.
He's just come out of a place where he is isolated from people who care about him, and if we can, keeping him here or keeping him close, where again, people who love him, his mother, Benjamin's family, his former patients, people can come see him.
For the people who can't look past the crime and find compassion,
if you accept that we all have our cognitively fallible or vulnerable moments, then you can accept why people do bad things from time to time. And Vince did a bad thing.
And he admits it.
And he admits it.
Yes, he killed his father. He did. And in so many of these cases, there are reasons why. And it's important, I always think, to look at those reasons. It might not necessarily excuse the behavior, but that history can act as a mitigating factor for sure.
But in that moment, he was affected by a traumatic brain injury. He was affected by fulminant depression. He was affected by coming off of his antidepressant precipitously. He was affected by a long history of sexual abuse. And so in that moment, he had no impulse control.
I mean, nobody knows how long Vince is going to live. But again, he should never have gone to jail in the first place. And it feels really good that I have played a role in helping him spend the last years of his life in places where he can get the care that he needs and the love of the people around him.
So it's been a crazy journey.
Emotional?
Yeah.